And before I leave the scene, of course, let me introduce our next speaker. Bengt Matson is one of our cluster group members and driving forces from the industry sides, and a double role for Pfizer and the research-based pharmaceutical industry in Sweden. You're also representing European pharmaceutical industry. You're an expert on environmental regulation for the pharmaceutical sector on all these different levels. Thank you very much, Bengt.
Thank you. How do I do this? Like that? Zoom. Thanks a lot for that introduction. I'll have a bunch of slides. I won't go into any details on several of them. They'll there for if you go back to the homepage of Svenskt Vatten or CV afterwards, you could go into some detail on those slides, and I think they might also be useful in our discussions at the workshop tomorrow. So that's why I incorporated a little bit too many slides for this presentation. Is that my slides? No? So what? Yeah, you did. Yeah, I recognize that one. I'll try to give a few industry perspectives on the topic, both a European initiative we call the Eco-Pharmaco Stewardship. I'll come back to that. And that also gives some perspectives from the Swedish market, some things we've done together with the Swedish stakeholders to address the problems we've discussed so far today. And I thought at least. I'll actually start out with a thing from the Swedish market that I think is kind of illustrative, that I believe there is some kind of an expectations from consumers that also pharmaceuticals should be somehow green. This is a picture from a work conducted by a student at Karolinska Institute, Goran Jassim, who went out to roughly 3,000 consumers in Sweden asking, have you ever made an inquiry for let's call it the green medicine, when you go to the pharmacy? And as you see, in the younger group, already today 17% have actually asked that question, although there is such a thing today as a green pharmaceutical, at least no labels like that exist, and a little bit less in the older groups. Then he asked, if there were green pharmaceuticals, would you be willing to pay a little bit extra to get that one? And to my surprise here, actually there is a fairly positive view on this. I know that you always respond more positively to these kind of questions than perhaps what you would actually do in the real world, so to speak. But at least this sends me a message that there seems to be some kind of a potential market for a pharmaceutical that both, of course, do what it's there for, the medical treatment that I need, but perhaps is somehow also manufactured responsibly, in a responsible way, and so on and so forth. So there seems to be some kind of a market, but also a expectation, I believe, from consumers or citizens, let's say that. If we look on a life cycle of a pharmaceutical, at least I would say there are two perspectives. We heard about this already today. When I entered into the industry back in the 90s, a lot of focus on packaging issues and energy. Around 2000, 2003, 4, 5, a lot of interest were starting to be paid to API, active pharmaceutical ingredient releases. which we know now comes from manufacturing operations, the use phase, and potentially also disposal of unused medicines. And moving forward, I'm quite certain that we'll need to find assessment tools, regardless whether it's in public procurement, as Pauline and Ignacio talked about, or in any other kind of perspective. We need to both look on resource efficiency, carbon footprint, whatever we call that, but also, of course, API releases. A lot of the discussion here in Sweden has been focused on API releases. Other countries more on the resource efficiency, carbon footprint side. UK, for instance, very focused on the carbon footprinting side. But here in Sweden, a lot of the discussions are focused on the API releases. This is just a little review of some of the recent stakeholder comments, whatever I call that. In the pharmaceuticals and environment arena, we've already heard about the Mistra Pharma policy brief Christina talked about. There are a number of NGO type of communication. One of them was the bad medicine report from some of us. Nordea is one of the biggest financial investors here in the Nordic region, and they have definitely picked up some of the concerns that Joachim and others have already addressed in China and India on API releases and a lot of the antimicrobial resistance risks associated with that, and ask us as major pharmaceutical companies on how we address those problems. And in the far right down corner, SciChem is the strategic approach to international chemical management, a UN initiative where it has been said now that the pharmaceuticals in the environment is a topic of global relevance. So it's up there. The pie issue, so to speak, is up there together with challenges around lead, nanoparticles, and those kind of concerns. So we see a lot of development in the arena, and of course, as an industry, we need to respond to this, take part of the discussions, and come up with what we believe are reasonable and good proposals for how to manage this. And this is what the European example I share with you, the Eco-Pharmaceutical Stewardship Initiative, which is a joint initiative by all the three major trade associations on the pharmaceutical side. The ASGP is for OTC, over-the-counter, prescription-free products. FPA is the research-based industry, and EGA, or medicines for Europe, as it's called today, for the generic industry and biosimilar industry. And what this really is what we believe some kind of a holistic approach to addressing pharmaceuticals in the environment. And we see this definitely as something we'd like to communicate with Helen and her colleagues in the Commission, and also with BioIS, of course, on what we see as good potential solutions. We believe everyone in the life cycle of a pharmaceutical needs to do their part. We as manufacturers have definitely a vital part to play, but also distributors, physicians, pharmacists, hospitals, users, and wastewater treatment facilities all have different roles. And in the end of the day, as we've of course heard, politicians of course need to make some kind of decisions that we'll have to live with. When it comes to our part, we've identified 3 priority activities. One we call the iPipe project. Helen briefly touched on that this morning. It's a joint initiative by industry and the Commission as part of the Innovative Medicines Initiative, IMI. And this project, to tell the short story of that project is to address what we usually call the legacy products, the old products. Christina Rydén talked about products that entered the market before 2006 that do not have full environmental data sets. So finding tools and methods to prioritize that bunch of old products that needs more information. The second pillar, effluent emission control from manufacturing, is our way to address the problems arising with unacceptable releases, API releases from industry, and how we could develop industry guidance, how we could share experience and best practices and actually benchmark towards one another. And the third pillar is a scheme for an extended environmental risk assessment. We strongly advocate that the environmental risk assessment for human medicines should not be part of the risk-benefit evaluation. The approval for the drug should be based on medical value, but we understand the importance of post-approval commitments to secure that environmental risk assessment is reviewed regularly, refined when necessary, and if we still see environmental risks, somehow we need to find a way to address and find the proper risk mitigation measures. In the following slides here, you'll have some details on these projects. I won't go into them today due to lack of time. The iPipe project is easily found on the internet, much more information on that one. I will comment on the manufacturing effluent control side, because here we have some good recent developments when it comes to trying to understand the different steps you'll take when you go from what we would see like more legal compliance type of work to assessing and controlling risks, and then into a more advanced relationship where you assess but also start benchmarking and really audit. And this holds true for both your own facilities and your third-party manufacturers in India, China, wherever they are. And we also here have a very clear collaboration, an important collaboration with the Pharmaceutical Supply Chain Initiative, which I think is something that CV definitely could pick up when it comes to a lot of for other sectors. You've seen this kind of collaboration among companies, and this is, so to speak, our example on how that could be conducted. And the third pillar is on the extended environmental risk assessment, and I'll just comment on one thing here that I think plays back to what Christina talked about when it come to the recommendations from Mistra Pharma. We want to see a process that takes into account all products containing the same API. So to use a word, looking into the total PEC rather than just your own product when you do the environmental risk assessment. Of course, we need to find how that would be addressed in the guidance documents, the legislation, but it's a way of doing that we believe is addressing some of the concerns. We also have a initiative on unused medicines. I often say we do not see this as a major issue here in Sweden, but in some other markets in Europe, we still need to secure that there are good collection systems in place. We believe, and this I said this to Helen and others, that access to medicine is paramount for patients and society, and impact on that access must form a key part of any policy on PI. And before they threw me out from this stage, Just some comments on the Swedish market. Sustainability criteria, Pauline talked about that. We welcome that from the industry side. Just want to be very clear that we need to follow up those criteria. You guys need to follow that up. And I think good performance should be rewarded. To be very honest, I don't think that is the case really today. Lowest possible price almost always win. You also know there is on fast.se already today classification of pharmaceutical substances, but we need to move from substances to product, and my final slides will be on that. There is a discussion since a few years back in time on green economic incentives as part of the generic substitution system here in Sweden. We are now introducing or have been commissioned by government to run the pilot study where we will test a environmental assessment model that was developed as part of the National Pharmaceutical Strategy, and we will now test that one on a few OTC prescription-free products. We'll have manufacturing in focus, both API releases and carbon footprint, as I said. And so it'll be that part, so to speak, of the life cycle, not looking on excretion from patients, but comparing products with the same API in the end of the day. Could that be a tool for healthcare to have in mind when choosing to go for a different product, still the same API, so the medical effect should be equal? There is in your handout there will be a example of how these models are being, or how these assessments should be done according to the model, and also the official commission that was given to us at LEAF to run this OTC drug testing when it comes to environmental assessments. And I'll stop with that, and hopefully we'll be able to conduct this and report it in the end of 2016 and share those results with you at a later stage.
So thank you very much, Bengt. Any questions from the audience to Bengt? Yes, please, Joachim. The
Big surprise.
So, I appreciate, of course, the initiatives here to work also on the manufacturing part. I was just curious about the last part there, that you will assess a number of over-the-counter products and for carbon footprint and API discharge. So, will you actually measure discharges of pharmaceuticals from those manufacturing units and report them publicly?
That's the model, Joachim.
Yep.
And according to the model, please provide the following information: country of primary API manufacturer, country of secondary manufacturer, name and location of supplier, general overview of the manufacturing process, general overview of emission scenarios, load estimates, so on and so forth. How did you calculate the PEC, or did you even measure it? And then summary of PEC versus PNEC.
But PEC is very, very difficult for manufacturing to do, since you have, you could calculate the sort of the yield, how much you put into a process and how much you get out, and what the potential losses are. But they could be during a very short time period, for example. So the short answer is that in this model, there's no measurement of
it doesn't have to be a measurement. I believe that one of the reasons why government wants us to do this now is to evaluate whether you could get hold of valuable information through a model like this. If one of the answers would be, yeah, a lot of things were good, but the PNEC calculation lacks some kind of perspectives. You need to find some kind of real data being monitored. If that's one of the results from this evaluation, of course we need to possibly review and refine the model. This is what we've set up now. We believe this is possible to do. We believe this is a valuable first step. If we would have said we base everything on measured environmental concentration and measurements being made according to these standards, I'm pretty sure we wouldn't even get started.
Okay. I think it's time to go further on to the next speaker. So many thanks, Bengt.
You're welcome.